Fallen SABER is the Grandmaster Nightfall this week, and while it isn't quite as difficult as the Lightblade, it can still present some problems if you aren't careful. Today I'm going to once again demonstrate my silly Anarchy Forbearance build, but also talk a bit more about actual good loadouts that you should use. My name is Davey, and while the loot this week isn't the best, it's duty-bound after all, the memories made in this GM will last a lifetime, unless they change the weapon because they changed it from Mindbenders the previous week due to an issue with the weapon roll, and I just didn't update it in time. Anyway, a few things to get out of the way right off the bat. We are not going to be discussing any cheeses to get past certain encounters. Yeah, the Warsat encounter can be cheese, but let's be really honest. Unless it's for a solo run, it's not necessary. I'm also not going to be spending a ton of time talking about meta weapons, but I will point them out and suggest them. Finally, this video will have background footage from two different runs. One with a pretty traditional loadout, aka my tryhard loadout, that I used to get the completion, and one not so traditional. Yeah, I used Anarchy again. Also, I'll likely be uploading both of those full runs if you wish to watch them with our commentary, but if not, completely understandable. However, the Anarchy run does have 3 different points where my kitten, named Arbalest, yes, after the gun, hits a button on my keyboard that opens up OneDrive, and yes, one of these times I die because of it. As for the GM itself, like most of the rest of them this season, it's an arc burn. You'll be facing off against Overload captains and barrier servitors, so be prepared for those. There are some arc shielded captains as well as 3 void servitors, one early on in the Warsat encounter while the other 2 are in the boss room. For those bringing it in, Arbalest mostly negates caring about shields, but we'll get to weapons momentarily. In any case, let's talk about class choice, subclasses, and weapons. For hunters, Invis is always a good choice and provides a lot of different options. I prefer Omni for damage resist as it allows me to be a bit more aggressive, but Assassin's Cowl could work as well. Arc is also a viable option here, again with Assassin's Cowl if you want survivability, or Liar's Handshake if you want to live on the edge a bit. Spicy players could also make a solar build work too, but I'd probably stick to Void or Arc, especially since it is an Arc burn. For Titans, Arc is going to be the play for most, as it should be. But Void is also still very strong, and Solar is also still viable, even if Lorelei got nerfed a bit. Arc makes the most sense though, given the burn and how insane storm grenades are. Heart of Inmost Light has been seeing a ton of usage regardless of Arc or Void, and for good reason. Solar still has its options with Lorelei and Synthosips, but again, most people are probably going to roll with Arc given everything going on in the current season. For Warlocks, Stasis is really good in this GM, especially when you're in the interior sections, as the Stasis turret will really help control things. Sure, it messes with overloads a bit, but it helps clear the rest of the trash adds out, which then makes dealing with the overloads a bit easier. Well of Radiance is still viable here as well, and enterprising Warlocks will be able to make Void and Arc work too, although Warlock Arc isn't quite as strong as Titan or Hunter, at least in my opinion. Stasis though is what I used the previous time to really make this easier, so definitely something to consider, especially if you have Omniomancy or even Eye of Another World. Someone running Aeons is a nice bonus, but really isn't entirely necessary. That said, if someone's going to do that, just be sure to call out when you want to finish a champ. For ammo, it'll save headaches later. Weapon-wise, all the usual suspects are present here. Arbalest, Wishender, Le Monarch, Trinity Ghoul, Storm Chaser, and Hothead are all smart choices. We've also used Gallahorn in conjunction with Hothead in the past with some great success. Divinity is also a really good choice, as you'll see in the first half of the footage. It's just so good at stunning overloads, which is why I still think it'll be valuable even after it gets nerfed. Someone on Witherhoard or Forbearance is also very helpful for ad clear, especially in the smaller spaces like when you first get into the bunker. Or you can do what I did in my second run and throw on Forbearance and Anarchy again and see what happens. Spoiler, it worked out just fine. Let's get rolling into the GM itself and talk a bit about each of the sections. For the beginning, there are a few things to consider. First is not to get blown up while on your Sparrow heading to the Warsat crash site. The second is to not get blown up by the Warsat itself. The third is, once you've started, you don't get blown up by the skiffs coming in. Seriously, shoot at the turrets immediately and get rid of them. Finally, don't stand in a circle for too long, but stand in it enough to progress the fight. At varying points, you'll spawn smaller ad waves to deal with, but around 35%, you'll get your first overload captain, and just past 40%, you'll get the second set of skiffs to spawn. They'll start dropping enemies behind you, so make sure you've cleared all of the previous ads out first before progressing it past that point. Once that second set of skiffs arrives, it's more or less the same routine. Progress the timer enough to spawn enemies, but don't overspawn things. You'll get a barrier servitor around 55% and another wave of ads just past 60%. Get everything cleared before you hit 70% though, as that's when you'll spawn the final skiff. And around 75% you'll get another overload captain, which after it's defeated, you could pretty much progress the timer to 100% without issue. Any enemies will despawn that are up once it hits 100%, so back off if you need to. An Invis Hunter could just sit in the circle until the timer runs out while everyone else hides way off in the back if needed. Now it's time to head inside of the bunker and into one of the first really challenging spaces in this GM. This is one of the tougher spots in the entire Grandmaster, so if you can get through this, you should be pretty good the rest of the way. It's a smaller space, but between the sniper vandals in the back protected by the barrier servitor and the invis guys running around, this room can feel real bad real fast. Unless you have a stasis warlock, your best bet is to head off to the left corridor as quickly as possible. Once inside, Titans can use their walls to blind the enemies that will come out of the back spawn point, or if you're like me and have anarchy, you can just throw that up as well. Spread out a bit and try to use the different exits to pick off whatever you can find, particularly marauders and such. If you have a stasis warlock with their super up, this is a great time to use it. Pop it in, head straight to the far end of the room and wreck those vandals. The barrier champ's protection won't stop a stasis freeze kill, so hit the vandals, pop them, and try to get out of there. You may die on the way back, but your teammates will not get sniped and will be grateful. If you have an opportunity to take out the barrier servitor, do so, as that will make everything a little bit easier. It may spawn more ads, including a couple of overloads, but it shielding everything is really annoying to deal with. Killing it just makes the room a bit easier despite the extra overloads, and maybe except for the tracer shanks that pop up. Get rid of them as quickly as possible, but use the cover in the corridor and you should be fine. You can then work on the overloads, taking them out one at a time, but they're pretty manageable, especially if you continue to stay in that corridor. Once clear, prepare for the next round of ads. You'll get some marauders out of that side corridor you've been hiding in, so having a Titan shield, grenade, and or anarchy ready for them will make them disappear pretty quickly. There'll also be some more tracer shanks, so eliminate them as quickly as you can. Finally, you'll also get a couple of more overload captains to deal with, so focus in on one at a time again and just get rid of them. This is another one of those areas where someone with divinity can make pretty quick work of these overloads, so definitely consider bringing that in. Next up is the Arc Lightning Hallway of Doom, where you have to transport an arc charge from one end of the hallway to the other while avoiding electric bolts, shanks, and explodey shanks. If you have a Titan familiar with Titan skating, this part's a bit easier, otherwise you're going to need to put a lot of trust in your teammates. The way we handle it typically is one person stands at the end of the hallway where you came in and tries to take out the shanks and exploder shanks on that end, while another teammate is in the middle taking out the ads up there. Alternatively, you could have a teammate standing at the end of the hallway while another stands in the corridor leading into that hallway as the door remains open. That person can shoot the stuff that drops down at that end pretty easily, while the teammate in the hallway can shoot the stuff further down. Just don't explode a shank on the teammate carrying the arc charge. That wouldn't be very nice. Funny? Yes. Nice? Probably not. After that, we have another small space to deal with that has a lot of enemies to worry about. Initially, you'll have shanks, exploder shanks, dregs, vandals, and an overload captain to deal with. But after clearing that, you'll also get a barrier servitor, tracer shanks, wretches, marauders, and more overload captains. This is where it can get a bit hectic if you aren't careful, so try to eliminate as many of the smaller guys as you can before moving on to the bigger targets. Once the last pair of overloads are in, try to focus fire one of them to make the room a bit easier. Add clear weapons shine in this space, particularly with the wretches and marauders that try to ruin things for you, as they will run right at you. With a horde at your feet, forbearance directly in front of you, anarchy directly in front of you will take care of them pretty quickly. Once clear of that room, you will find yourself in the last room before the boss. This one really isn't that bad if you take your time and prioritize your targets. The vandals should be taken out before they are shielded by the barrier servitor that's in the room, then take out the servitor. However, if Berry Boy manages to shield the vandals fast, take it out first while being mindful of said snipers. After that, you'll have some regular enemies to deal with and 3 overload captains. This sounds bad, but it really isn't. They typically group up, so if someone has divinity on, you can sometimes stun all 3 at once. That said, pick one, stun it, get rid of it, and do the same for the rest. There's plenty of cover here, and they tend to stay on the lower section towards the back of the room, so they really shouldn't cause too much trouble. The sniper vandals in this room will probably cause you more trouble than anything else. Now, onto the boss room. This room can be a bit rough if you aren't familiar with it, but there is a place you can stand for the first part of it where you're mostly safe. The main thing I want to emphasize here is when shanks start pouring in at various points, someone should be trying to get rid of them. Later on, exploder shanks and tracer shanks will join the fray, and those become increasingly annoying, so take those out even quicker. The bottom line is someone should be focusing on shanks while the other two players are doing boss damage. But you gotta land in the room first, something that's hit or miss. Try not to hit that angled wall going down and you should be fine, but sometimes, well, it's not so fine. And usually it's not a problem for me, but yeah, there's always that one time. Anyway, once you clear the initial shanks and servitors, the fight will actually begin. The easy way to do this is run to the right side of the room and use the panels in front of the wall as cover. The boss won't really try to shoot you there, but you could shoot him pretty easily. He'll drift around in front, and if you do poke your head out too far, there's a chance that you could get popped, but stay behind those panels and you'll likely be fine. You don't have to do this, but it does make the fight easier. More daring players will sometimes stay in the middle and take their chances. I'm not that daring. Yet. In any case, as you damage him, shanks will start to load in. This is where I took advantage of anarchy on our second run to tag the boss, then focus on the shanks. At the quarter mark of his health, the boss will retreat and you'll get a few more shanks and a barrier champ. Stay behind the panels for now as the boss will not shoot you while back there, and you'll be able to take care of the barrier champ and all of the ads with relative ease. The second stage pretty much goes the same as the first. Damage the boss till his health hits about 50%, at which point he'll become immune again. Right before that happens, though, you'll get more shanks spawning in. This time you'll get some exploder shanks and tracer shanks as well, which can make things a bit interesting. Once again, one or two teammates focusing on the smaller ads while someone else deals with the barrier champ will work, as the smaller ads are what cause the most trouble. Obviously, once you get rid of SABER first. Once the barrier champ is defeated, it's time to leave that safety spot as the panel you're hiding behind will disappear. If you can invis your teammates, do so, as that will make the journey easier. Otherwise, move quickly before the boss fully spawns back in, because he will try and probably successfully snipe you. Run to the platform to the left of where you came in, but be careful to avoid any pillars with electricity on them, as they will zap you in one shot. There will be some platforms raising up into the air that you can use for cover over here. Be aware that exploder shanks will begin spawning in, so somebody should be eliminating them while the rest of your team shoots the boss. Once you hit his final 25% of health, he'll go full on electrocution mode, so hit him with everything you have, being mindful that the platforms you're using for cover will be lowering. He'll be roaming around the area where you entered the room, and if he gets close enough, he will suddenly move very quickly to try and melee zap you. Hit him with everything you've got and finish him to claim victory. Overall, this GM can be a bit spicy at times, but it is definitely manageable and nowhere near as difficult as the Glassway or the Lightblade. I'd put it in the middle tier of difficulty overall this season, right alongside the Disgrace and Exodus Crash. As with the last video, what are your thoughts on this GM? What suggestions would you have for anyone trying to get a clear? What worked for you? What didn't? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next one.